You're listening to the ATS Breathe Easy podcast, brought to you by the American Thoracic Society.
Welcome back to the ATS Breathe Easy podcast. I am your host, Ugo Ezema. We are diving back into our conversation about mid-career in medicine and healthcare. Before our break, Dr. Montemayor made a strong point that conversations around financial literacy need to happen earlier in our careers. And so that got me thinking, if we already know medicine delays certain life milestones, and we already know mid-career brings a wave of financial and personal pressure, then why aren't we teaching life literacy alongside the Krebs cycle? Why don't we intentionally build financial education, negotiation skills, retirement planning, and leadership boundaries into the framework of medical training? Because by the time we're quote unquote mid-career, we're no longer just physicians. We're partners, parents, caregivers, leaders, and community figures. So let's explore that. Should financial literacy and life literacy be formal parts of medical education? And what would change if they were? Let's dive back in.
I often wonder if, again, going back to the delayed adulthood theory, if we should incorporate along the framework of medical education pieces of financial literacy, life literacy, that we otherwise would not be, we otherwise would not be exposed to until, we reach this stage. And I wonder if that would actually have tremendous benefits for the for medical trainees and medical professionals up front.
That's a great question, Ugo. It's actually interesting. I was part of a grant application, through ATS, actually, from an early career faculty member, Justin Krutzinger at Nebraska, who basically had developed a curriculum for financial literacy for pulmonary critical care fellows and implemented it at a bunch of sites. One of some of our fellows, I think any of your classmates went through it, but a couple of them have gone through it. And anyway, it was a really great idea, again, trying to address this exact issue. But you could argue that fellowship's a little bit too late to be starting that. Really, we should be starting this.
It's hard to think about a Krebs cycle and balancing your checkbook at the same time.
Right.
Right. No, couldn't agree more, Josh, with what you said. And I think in addition to kind of the financial literacy and kind of what the day-to-day and how you should be thinking about, money flow and savings, et cetera, I think something to also talk about a little bit earlier is as you enter mid-career, this is a time where people are being asked to step into leadership roles. So professional expectations escalate, but often leadership roles, I don't know about you, Josh, but leadership roles don't always come with extra money, right? It may come with recognition, specifically like in education-heavy or science-oriented paths, but it's, you're doing a lot more and not necessarily getting compensated from a financial standpoint. Which is okay, and that's part of the nature of this. So, but I think hearing about that earlier on and guiding people with, right, you may be asked to do these roles. Your income may not change, but here are some strategies that you could do to make this role sustainable for you, right? So, for asking for extra protected time, or asking for those that may need leadership roles within the basic science realm, are they going to be getting support and coordinators and lab space, et cetera, whereas those in the education or clinical realm maybe having different needs. But I think having those conversations a little bit earlier as well, I think could be helpful when people start to think about things.
Yeah, that's absolutely.
And it's interesting. I think, especially in medicine, I would make the case that we have a higher threshold for tolerating a lot of things. And one of them is doing work that you're not adequately compensated for. We've been doing it since residency and et cetera, et cetera. So I think a lot of our conditioning is very accepting of things that aren't normal outside of medicine.
Yeah.
So that also adds to, a big topic in medicine now is about physician burnout and what does burnout look like, especially when you're now juggling perhaps more or higher stakes things, being assistant program director, heading all these committees, et cetera, even being program director or anything else. What does burnout look like at this stage? I think burnout at an early career is more feeling overwhelmed with work, or not feeling necessarily valued at work. Does the same apply with mid-career?
Such an important topic, and thank you for bringing up this question, Ugo. I agree with you, right? Early career burnout, I think, it's a more drastic, right? You're either like either have highs or you have lows, right? You get the paper accepted or you don't. You get the grant or you don't. And I feel like mid-career, I would say burnout's a little quieter. That less dramatic exhaustion, almost like emotional flattening, I would say. I've been talking to some colleagues and just kind of reflecting on how I felt at times throughout the last year. And it's almost too, I feel like at this stage, you can feel competent, be successful on paper if someone's looking at your CV, but you may have like this internal disconnection or misalignment, like, some people may say like cynicism may come at this stage, loss of creativity, maybe a sign of burnout, or almost like just feeling trapped. It's hard to say this or kind of think about it, but like trapped by your own success. So I think burnout could look a lot quieter in this stage and can often go overlooked though. So I think it's important to think about because, right, I think at mid-career, you don't feel senior enough sometimes to feel like empowered, but you're not junior to where you need someone to, always be checking on you or have that kind of feeling of things. So it's a hard space to be, like kind of like the middle child. You still need to be seen and you still want people to check on you, but how that looks could be different. But I don't know, Josh, if any of that rings true to you or you have different thoughts.
Absolutely. Smoldering is the word I was thinking as you said that, things just kind of smolder and it's not a dramatic, I can't do this anymore, I quit or whatever it is. It's more of a, or another term I've thrown around is a death by 1,000 cuts, right? Or it feels like that, So yeah, definitely. And we've all seen it or experienced it, right? I mean, you guys can think immediately of several people that are going through it or yourself or yourself at times, etc. It's an area that I've thought a lot about and I've done a bit of research in, and it's a tough area to study. It's a tough area to determine the etiology of. I'm definitely a believer in that it's not the amount of work that necessarily leads to burnout. I think it really is a mindset. I think it is the workplace environment, and that is why it's so hard to fix it. Is we've created these environments that are really not conducive to, uplifting the people working in it. The ATS has a session actually focused on mid-career, and one of the topics is specifically focusing around strategies to mitigate burnout and enhance career satisfaction. That's on, I believe it's Tuesday afternoon, and it should be good. It's a scientific symposium through the Professional Development Committee. So I would encourage everyone to check that out because I think there's some speakers there that I think will be really hitting on all the topics that we're talking about today. But it's a culmination of everything coming together. All of what we've already talked about today, from life pressures, work pressures, financial pressures, at a time where you're not necessarily being compensated as much for, and you can have that smoldering feeling of, I already did this. I already did my early career, hard-working years. Whereas in other professions, you're like, all right, you get like a big promotion in mid-career, you become, executive board, et cetera, et cetera. But in medicine, the good thing about medicine is that it's stable, but it's stable in that you don't have the big highs all the time, at least not sometimes as a career aspect you do, but in general, you're there, you're working, you're helping people, you're teaching people, you're mentoring people, whatever your job entails. And that smoldering burnout in mid-career is definitely prevalent. In terms of how do we fix it, everything we've studied so far has not really helped. All I know is that adding things doesn't seem to really be a solution. People have tried, adding different types of therapy. We did a cognitive behavioral therapy study. I've seen, as you guys all know, your hospitals have added small gifts or pizza or whatever have you, and to the point that it becomes something that people on social media end up just making fun of. I think it's all well intentioned. It's hard to fix the underlying problem, and we haven't figured that out. It's an area we got to talk about more and think about more.
From what I've read, and to be honest, I read about this because I was trying to do a piece about it, a little piece about it on social media with regards to burnout, because there's a misconception that it is about hard work or the avoidance of hard work. But my pitch is that burnout is what happens when it's not just the hard work, is that the hard work is already being done, but it goes unrecognized, unrewarded, or morally compromising. So I've been preaching that we need to stop telling people that they just need to connect their efforts to their goals, because the problem, at least based on the research that I've done with regards to especially physician burnout, it's not because the solutions that are being pitched are personal solutions, yoga, meditation, things like that. But the solutions that actually work are more systematic or systemic solutions. The biggest cause of burnout amongst physicians is essentially administrative burden or clerical burden. So for every hour you spend with a patient, you spend another hour documenting and trying to make sure the note is adequate for billing, but also make sure it's adequate for a defensive side in case something goes wrong. So there's a lot of clerical and administrative burden that leads to burnout that no one is addressing. Instead, we're having, meditation and all that stuff, taking more personal accountability as opposed to systematic accountability. Dr. Montemayor, you had mentioned feeling stuck or trapped by your success, and that really stood out to me. How common is it to feel stuck or trapped by your success, and what contributes to that kind of stagnation? Because I imagine what it is you become the kind of a specialized person based on your success. I think about it like a basketball player who becomes a three-point shooter, but they can do everything else. But because the first 5, 7, 8 years, they've made all these threes, people just put them out to the corner and say, hey, just catch the ball and shoot. So is that similar? Is that a good analogy for what you're describing?
I think so, Ugo. I played basketball in high school too, so I love that analogy. Right? It's like sometimes we just want to lay up. We don't want to be. We don't want to always be the 3-point shooter. Sometimes we want a different shot.
Early bird registration for ATS 2026 in Orlando is now open. Register now and save. Members get a discount, so become an ATS member or renew your membership to take advantage of the savings. Visit conference.thoracic.org today.
I think that's a great analogy, right? And thinking of things too, and I think I'm talking with a colleague who recently, just got an R01, which was fantastic for her work. And I would say she's mid-career, but with that, it's a lot more responsibility came with just that one grant that she got. So it's hard. As I was talking with her, it's a different perspective. I'm like, oh, like things are great. Like you're getting asked to, speak, and like you're getting international recognition now. Like this is fantastic. But taking a step back and being like, wow, this is probably a lot for this person to challenge, and do things day to day and and I think maintaining boundaries is a little bit harder sometimes as people become more successful. So how you are intentional with keeping boundaries. And I think to Josh's point earlier too, I still think about, yes, you may be successful in other people's eyes and your own eyes, but what is going to happen in 5 years? What is going to happen in 10 years? And what are your goals and how is that going to change? I think one thing I tried to start asking myself too, because I feel like one of the questions that I ask applicants now on interview day, instead of the 5 to 10 year plan, I'll be like, okay, you're at ATS in 10 years and you're going to be recognized by the ATS organization as an early career faculty member. Like, what area do you want to be known in front of your peers about? Like, that could be anything. It could be teaching, clinical research. So I think I started asking myself that, wow, like when in 10, 15 years, I'm going to be at ATS being awarded, award for, senior faculty member. Like, what do I want to be known for amongst my peers in pulmonary critical care? I still don't exactly know quite yet, but, it's a different way to start thinking about things. So sometimes I think we just have to start thinking and reframing things a little bit differently as we go through our career paths.
No, I mean, it's a lot of people in medicine, especially doctors. You're going to, not only have you invested financially into your career that you are now in and literally tied to by loans, but you don't know how to do much else. You don't know how to, save for retirement. You don't know how to play basketball. Whatever it is, there's plenty of examples like that, right? I mean, you've done it at your own cost, and you've gone through some training that puts gray hair on your head, and coming back to your point on burnout, I think a lot of people, if you ask a doctor, when was your happiest kind of time in your career? A lot of people, I think back to residency and or fellowship, which is probably
100%.
the hardest time that you've ever worked in your life, and I always make that point where I'm like, well, I want more time off, or I want more, et cetera. I want to have more protected time, whatever it is. Well, I don't think it's that time off. I think working harder is better for burnout when you're in the right environment, when you have a team mentality. And I think sometimes that is lacking once you become a faculty member. Like, yeah, you have a team, but it's just not the same, right? You guys know it's not your co-residents, it's not your co-fellows where you're really in the trenches. And when you're faculty, you have a team, but everyone's also got their own priorities. They got life, they got kids, they got parents, they got all the things. So it's I find there's a bit of a less that to me that I think contributes to some of this. It's not really a solvable problem, I don't think yet. But that to me, that's part of like kind of what goes into burnout. But yeah, we are kind of trapped in your own success, which most people would say, oh, woe is you, But it's everybody's got problems in different areas. As I tell my son, there's always people better, there's always people worse. You just gotta have that perspective, and you always got to find where you fit in and not try to deviate too far. I don't know that helps answer the question, but it's when you're how do people get out of this feeling of being stuck, or how do they successfully navigate the challenges of mid-career? Is there's always someone in a better and a worse situation. You're no different than anybody next to you, and trying to find your way through that pathway, as linear or as nonlinear as it may be, is what life is about,
And that kind of leads me to, and we've spoken about this along the way, and I think that's kind of a good, interesting thread about this conversation is, what are some of the barriers and structural or cultural or personal that often make career pivots in medicine, especially difficult in mid-career? Now, Dr. Montemayor, you could speak to this, having made a mid-career pivot from being a nurse to going into being a physician. What were some barriers to that decision in that case? And if you were to make a similar decision now, what would be essentially be hindering you? Dr. Denson kind of hinted at, you're kind of in this kind of the inertia of medicine is so strong. Because once you get into medical school, the inertia is residency. The next inertia is fellowship. The next inertia is like you kind of have to pay off your loans. And so like there's always something that pushes you forward that might prevent you from making any meaningful career pivots. What are some of the structural, cultural, or personal barriers that you can identify in your own experience that can make these pivots particularly difficult?
I think a lot to unpack with that question. And I think people will face a lot of things. I think reflecting back on my pivot from nursing to medicine, things at the time that were maybe some barriers were I had a full-time career. So leaving a full-time career where I was bringing in half of our income for my wife and I to basically being a student again for some time was not an easy decision to make, but something I feel grateful that I had her support with. I think other things to think about too, right? I had to really think about, I mean, I think it pushed me to think about what is it that I want in life, right? I have this career. I'm happy at work. I was an assistant nurse manager at the time when I went from nursing to medical school. And I was like, look, if I stay on this path that I'm currently on, I think like this is what I envision the way things looking like. It was a balance. I had direct patient care, which provided me joy. I had a leadership position, which also provided me joy. So kind of giving that up and kind of going into an unknown, I think was hard. Like, am I going to be successful in medicine? Like, what is that going to look like for me? That thought process really solidified the decision for me to do it, and really made me who I am to be today. So if I had the opportunity to do it again, I would 100% do it for me, because it was personally the right choice for me and my family. But as you said, barriers. I mean, there were a lot of sacrifices along the way. I had to work full time and I had to work nights and then go to school during the day to finish my prereqs to go to med school. That took a little bit longer. Leaving kind of my family in Texas and moving away was also very hard to do, but definitely a sacrifice that I thought would be helpful for my training. But how do I think of that situation and apply it more to a situation now? People potentially wanting to pivot in mid-career. Not that it's unheard of, but I think that this does happen, pretty frequently, where people may have started out with a primarily research career and then want to pivot to more clinical career, or even more of an education type career. And I think the other way around. I think we see that in different things as people get experiences and different opportunities come about. But I think it all comes down to you having to personally reflect, what is going to make you happy, what's going to bring you joy. I hope everyone has some type of joy when they go to work, but that could look different for different people. So thinking about that, I think, is really important.
I've always done myself is I actually tend to set the bar pretty low, whether it was been when I was taking the MCAT or my boards or grades or residency or fellowship. I was always, and I do this as an ICU doctor too, is I tend to prepare families for worst case scenario. I prepare myself for worst case scenario, or my fellows or my son, whoever it is. I tend to, like, even if you fail this test miserably, or even if you don't match, or let's say you don't make this baseball team, which he's trying out for today, things, whatever it is, like, it's going to be okay. The lows are never so low that it's the end of the world. They also should never be so high that you're on top of the world. And life, I minored in philosophy in college. I don't know if I actually learned anything other than how to think a little bit. And everything in life is about moderation, right? And finding where you fit in that is okay either way.
Thank you. No, that was well said, both of you. I want to talk about ATS and how ATS is supporting mid-careers, what toolkits, roadmaps, things of that nature that are available for physicians in their mid-careers.
Glad you asked that, Ugo, because I wanted to mention one other thing is we have a roadmap that's geared towards mid-careers. We always have had an early career roadmap as part of the old MIT committee that I was on before. I don't know what it's called even anymore. And we used to create an early career roadmap, which kind of guided new people to ATS. Where are the best talks that are relevant to your career? Where are the best events to go to? So we're gearing one up for the mid-career. We did one last year, and it's kind of a newer area. But as we talked about today, it's hard to really define that. But you'll see this year we have new things. We have the storytelling series, which are Sunday, Monday, Tuesday at 4 p.m. In the Networking Supercenter. It's open. We often have an open bar available. It's supposed to be casual. I encourage you to attend that. We have the PDC has the scientific symposium, breathing new life into your career and thriving through transitions, which, it has great speakers from all walks of ATS. So I'd encourage that. And then the toolkit and the roadmap, which will be coming out and on the website soon. At least are the things that I know from a mid-career standpoint, and ATS is trying to really support. So feel free you can email me or look on the website to get more information about that.
So these are the things that will be available at ATS 2026.
Yeah, those are fantastic things. And I think ATS as an organization is so wonderful, right? Because it provides community. And I feel like every member feels seen in whatever way, wherever they are along the career. I know we were all, Josh was saying too, like he probably joined when he was a resident. I remember joining as a resident too. And like we've been retained for the last few years because of the opportunities that are there. So yeah, I'm looking forward to definitely those mid-career opportunities that Josh mentioned. I think a couple other things that I particularly like every year, really being involved in your assemblies. I think that there's a lot of opportunities for faculty of all stages within your own assembly. And I'm a big fan of the Women in Diversity Forum. Getting to hear people tell their story is a lot of things that we talked about today, just hearing how others have struggled with things, how they've overcome things, how they've used a peer network and mentorship along the way, I think are important. So in addition to what Josh mentioned, those are a couple other things I wanted to make sure that we highlighted that is going to ATS 2026 can make sure to attend.
I'd second that. The diversity forum's awesome. It's every year. It's great if you can make that.
Fantastic. I'm looking forward to ATS 2026. And that brings us to the end of today's conversation. Dr. Montemayor and Dr. Denson, thank you both for being so open and honest about the realities of mid-career life in medicine. We've covered a lot of ground today, from recognizing when you're actually entering into this phase to managing the financial pressures that seem to compound right when you thought you'd finally gotten ahead. We talked about burnout and what that looks like when you're no longer a trainee, but an established professional who's supposed to have it all figured out. We explored some moments of feeling stuck, the challenge of pivoting from institutional structures that weren't built for career transitions, and the very real juggling act of caring for children and aging parents while still showing up as a leader in your field. But we spoke about hope, right? We spoke about the resources that ATS is building, the toolkits and the roadmaps designed specifically for where you are right now and what's coming out for those of you attending at ATS 2026. If today's conversation resonated with you, I encourage you to explore those ATS resources and to attend ATS 2026. And remember, being mid-career doesn't mean being stuck necessarily. It just means you have experience, perspective, and choices, even when it doesn't always feel that way. Thank you for listening to ATS Breathe Easy podcast. I'm Dr. Ugo Ezema, and until next time, keep growing and keep moving forward.
Thank you for joining us today. To learn more, visit our website at thoracic.org. Find more ATS Breathe Easy podcasts on Transistor, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe so you never miss a show.